Hey everyone, this is Yvette Hampton. Welcome back to the Schoolhouse Rocked podcast. I am thrilled that you have joined me again today. I have a return guest on. Her name is Jamie Erickson, and she was in the first part of season 1, and we had such a great response from her episode that she did, and she was so encouraging. It's one of the most listened to episodes that we've ever done. And so I'm excited to have her back talking about her new book that she just released and a new podcast that she is doing with a couple of other mamas. Jamie is a Christian mother to 5 blissfully abnormal kids and wife to her formerly homeschooled husband, Dain. She can be found encouraging and equipping a growing tribe of mothers all across the globe on the Mom to Mom podcast and through her blog, The Unlikely Homeschool. She speaks at national conferences, and in addition to writing and speaking, she loves talking faith and family over a cup of coffee and hanging out with her family. So, Jamie, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me again.
Yes, I am so glad to have you back. You are a homeschool mama who loves to encourage homeschool moms. It is one of the big passions that God has put on your heart, and you do it well. So I am thrilled to have you again. So I want to talk about 2 things. I want to talk about your new podcast that you recently launched and about your new book that you recently launched. But let's talk about the podcast first really quickly, because I really want to spend most of the time talking about your new book. So tell us about your podcast.
Okay, it's called the Mom to Mom podcast, and I co-host it with Kate Battistelli, and she's the mother of, perhaps you know, Francesca Battistelli, the Christian singer, and then September McCarthy, and she is a mother of 10 and a homeschooling mom. We've all homeschooled at various places on the journey. And what I love about our podcast, and kind of why I initially wanted to take on a project, is that we're 3 moms, 3 different stages and seasons of motherhood, and we've really seen the gamut of motherhood because, you know, Kate and September have grandchildren, and we're all in different places. And we don't always agree on everything, but we have the common thread of Jesus weaving all of our words together. And so we have the same goal, to see our children come to know the Lord and love him. And so it's a really gospel-centered podcast that hopefully encourages moms, you know, in every place. It's really a podcast, at least I hope, for every mom, for every season.
Yeah. So it's not just about homeschooling, though you guys talk a little bit about homeschooling on there. A
little bit, but it's really just for any mom. We don't necessarily focus on homeschooling. Obviously, we all homeschooled or homeschool currently, but we recognize that not every mom is called to that, and not every listener will be a homeschool mom. So it's really, hopefully, for every mom. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's excellent. I've listened to it a few times, and it is definitely become one of my favorite podcasts to listen to. So thank you for doing that. I love listening to podcasts. Oftentimes people will say, when do you find time to do it? And I'm like, I don't have any more time than you have, trust me. But that's usually my, when I'm in the shower and getting ready in the morning, putting on makeup or whatever, I can get in at a few minutes, 20 or 30 minutes. Sometimes it's in spurts, but
well, and I love to read, but I don't always have the time to sit down and read. So podcast is a really easy go-to to listen to while I'm doing the dishes or laundry. And
yes, I've just really for myself jumped on the audiobook bandwagon. We've done it with our girls for a really long time, but I've never really done audiobooks myself. And I found myself not reading as much because, like you said, I just don't have time. By the time I fall into bed at night, I'm so tired, and I will pick up a book and try to read it, and then I'm closing my eyes, and before I know it, I'm asleep, and I've read maybe a page. But I can do audiobooks, and I love that. Those keep me a little bit more alert, and so I am enjoying audiobooks a little bit more, and I can play them on a little bit faster speed. So
that's nice. Yeah, I think it's always good for moms to pour into themselves, because you can't pour out from an empty cup. So if you're intaking some great information or even just reading to expand your own horizons, anything that you do that sort of maybe only looks like is adding to you really adds to your whole family, because you come ready to teach and to share, and you have a wealth of knowledge to bring to the table.
Yes. And I feel like there's such a good balance between that we have to find as moms, because we don't want it to be all about me, and how can I serve myself, and how can I make myself happy.
Absolutely.
We're serving our families, but at the same time, like you said, if our cup is empty, I mean, we then have very little to give. And so we need to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves as well, not in a selfish or idolatrous ways, but so that we have more to give to our families, that we're resting and exercising and doing the things that we need to do so that we can care well for our families. So,
Absolutely.
yes. Well, okay. So that's the podcast, the Mom to Mom podcast, and that can be found on iTunes, Spotify.
You could go to momtomompodcast.com and
Okay.
you can go directly to it there, or we're also on Instagram.
Okay, great. We'll put links to that. Let's talk about your new book, though. I am super excited about this book, and I actually love the title of the book. That was the first thing that really captured me. It's called Homeschool Bravely: How to Squash Doubt, Trust God, and Teach Your Child with Confidence. But I love the homeschool bravely part of it because so many moms, we've spent the last 2.5 years filming for Schoolhouse Rocked. Mm-hmm. And the number one thing that we hear from every single mom, it does not matter who the mom is. Everything that we hear is mom doesn't feel like she is adequate enough to home educate her children. There has only been one mom in all of our interviews who said, yep, I totally felt like I was capable of doing this. And she has her doctorate in education, and she did her dissertation on homeschooling. And so I would say, yes, she has every right to say that she felt like she was totally equipped to teach her kids. But for the most part, most of us do not feel like we are capable of doing that. And the reality is we're really not. That's why we need the Lord to help us through this. But we also need to just take that step of bravery and just say, you know what, this is what we feel is best for our kids. And so we're just going to take this leap of faith and we're going to do it. Talk a little bit about why you decided to write. Well, first, talk about why you chose to homeschool yourself, and then talk about what led to writing the book.
Well, I was a teacher for several years, even before having kids. And my husband, like you had mentioned, was homeschooled. And homeschooling was never in my radar. In fact, my mother-in-law had asked me a couple years before I even had kids if I'd ever consider homeschooling. And I said, absolutely not. And it wasn't anything against homeschooling. I just thought I had the perfect gig as a mom, that my kids could come to school with me. We'd have the same vacation time. I'd be able to spend quality time at school with them. So on paper, everything looked like, I would continue teaching and everything would be great. But God's plans are so much different than our plans. Yeah. And he began to just slowly, sprinkle that idea in my thoughts that homeschooling might be a good path for us. And part of that, I would say that the real catalyst for that was that it was kind of twofold. One, when I had my first daughter, I just honestly couldn't envision myself handing her off to somebody for 6 to 8 hours a day. Not that I didn't trust anybody else. It's just that I loved her so much, and I didn't want to miss out on those moments with her. Even when she was really little and she wasn't even, school was just a few years, down the road, and we weren't even close to sending her off yet. I still had those painful thoughts of what am I going to do when she has to go to school? So that was part of it. And I also think that if I'm being really honest, part of my reason to want to homeschool was that as a teacher, I had seen sort of the underbelly of what it was like for kids in school. And I think teaching sort of ruined me for anything but homeschooling.
So then was it hard for you, since you'd been in the classroom, whether it's public school or private school, you have to kind of fit kids into a box. You're forced to. There's no other way to do it when you've got a classroom full of, anywhere from 20 to 30 kids or more. Was that hard for you when you started homeschooling to break out of that?
Yeah, I often hear from moms. In fact, I just wrote an article about this, about how helpful or actually unhelpful my teaching degree was when it came to homeschooling. Because I think moms without that teaching degree, moms without that doctorate and dissertation feel lesser than and feel like they are ill-equipped. But actually, because I do have a teaching degree, I can say that I came to homeschooling with sort of a burden on my back. I had all of these preconceived notions about what schooling was supposed to be
Mm-hmm.
because I had been trained to teach the masses, and that looks
Right.
so much differently and has to. I mean,
Right.
even the best of teachers, they have to maintain order and they have to teach sort of with this idea of herd mentality. And and when you bring that, you take that square peg and try to fit it in this round
Yeah.
hole of homeschooling. It just doesn't fit, and it really was a burden more than it was a blessing
Mm-hmm.
the first few years of homeschooling. And then, I found my groove and realized I could cast off the chains of, the old guard down the street and
Yeah.
do it my way. But right away, I think my degree wasn't helpful.
Yeah. But loving your children a whole lot was.
Absolutely.
So
And
was
knowing
there,
them well
yeah,
helped.
right. Yeah, so much. So you said, you obviously you loved her, you wanted to spend time with her, you wanted to be with her. Do you remember that kind of aha moment of like, oh yeah, I actually do want to homeschool. I said I never would, but I think this is really a good idea. Do you remember that moment, or was it more of a process of time?
I think it was a process for me,
Hmm.
um, that God slowly started to show me I've been teaching her all along,
Yeah.
and that doesn't have to necessarily stop just because she meets this magical age that the
Hmm.
school district determines.
Hmm.
She has to then be taught by someone else. Who
Right.
was it that taught her to walk, that taught her to
Right.
talk? If you look at statistically child growth and development, 90% of what a person learns, they learn by the time they're 5. So in
Mm.
those first 5 formative years, I had already taught her 90% of what she
Yeah.
needed to know. Why did I need to pass it off to somebody else?
Yeah. Yep. I'm with you.
But it was a process for me, I guess.
Sure. Yeah. And I think it was for me too, a little bit. We'd said we'd never homeschool. And then I think it was kind of like you at that moment when I held this baby in my arms. I'd waited 11 years to be a mom. And I was like, I really like her. Like I really genuinely
Right.
like her. And I love spending time with her. I love being with her. I love watching her grow. I love getting to experience all her first things, her first steps and her first word, and just the things that you would miss. And the same with school. I love getting to watch her just figure out what her life is meant to be and how God designed her. And so it's really exciting to be that mom who gets to come alongside of our kids and experience. I think it's Israel Wayne, he talks about that kids are in school, if they go to school from kindergarten through 12th grade, it's like 10,800 hours, somewhere around there. 10,800 hours.
That you miss
I mean,
out.
think about that. That is a long time to miss out on your child's life. And then,
And
of course, they grow up and move out of your house and,
what you get on the back end of that when they do come home at the end of that long day is really the leftovers.
yeah,
You get the extras that are left over. They're just tired and they don't really have much else to give. I didn't want the leftovers.
yeah, yeah. Well, okay. So I'm sitting here recording with you, and this is really funny. I emailed you last night and I said, I haven't gotten my copy of the book yet. And so you sent me a little bit more information on it because I'd been waiting for it to come. And my husband literally just walked in as we're recording and he handed me my new copy of your new book. So here it is, you guys. This is so exciting. So I've literally not even opened it. He
Does
just
it have
walked
the
in.
new book smell?
It does. I love the smell of books. I love the smell of libraries.
Yes. Yeah.
They smell so good. They have a certain smell. And it doesn't matter what library you go to, anywhere in the country, they all smell the same. California to
Really need to
Georgia.
bottle that smell and wear it as a
Right?
scent.
Yes. Maybe we can make candles and market those to homeschool moms, right? So, Homeschool Bravely, this is your new book. Walk us through it a little bit. Tell us about some of the chapters that you've got in it. I mean, I'm looking at it right here. But walk us through the book a little bit.
Okay, well, it's divided into 3 different parts. The first part really touches on the fears that homeschooling moms struggle with, because I think there's some really prevalent universal fears. As moms, we naturally kind of have this lifelong relationship with self-doubt, all
Mm-hmm.
moms, I think. But then you go ahead and you add on the weight of your child's education, and that's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
That's a whole mess bag of additional fears that you carry, because now the burden of proof is on you
Yeah.
for those 12 years of schooling. So the first part talks about fears, and the second part is really referencing some of the struggles that we have as homeschool moms. I think there's some key ones, when you're trying to homeschool, when you have lots of little ones underfoot, and trying to live in the tension of being mom, but also being teacher. There's the struggle of teaching a struggling learner or somebody who just regular academics, doesn't come easy or click with. Then there's the struggle of teaching sort of that child, one of those wild ones that doesn't want to, color within the lines and who always has the crossed arms. What do you do on the days where all you see is just, chins raised in the air and, defiance, and I don't want to do this. And so hopefully I speak to that in that particular section. And then just the struggle of the crazy, chaotic days of just combining home and school. Even if you don't have a struggling learner or you don't have toddlers, anytime you try to mesh together a bunch of imperfect people in the world, you're going to have struggles because Jesus told you would, in this world you will have struggles. So that's the second part of the book. And then the last part is the solutions. Where do we go when we need bravery and it's just not coming? What is the source, the hope that we have? Where do we look to squash all those fears?
Yeah, I love the solutions. We always need those. I mean, we can work through all of the problems and talk about them and be frustrated about them and even pray about them. But it's so great to have actual solutions, and in reality, God's going to give us what we need. But I love that in this book, you offer actual practical ways to deal with those things.
Yeah, hopefully there's lots of takeaways. And it's not a homeschooling how-to book, because I think there's plenty of those on the market. Some really great women have already written them and have done a much better job than I could. But there's plenty of practical tips and takeaways, I hope, within the pages.
Yeah. So why this book? What made you want to write this book? Because there are, as you mentioned, there's a lot of different homeschool books out there. Many really excellent ones. And I'm sure this is definitely in line with all of those. So with all of those out there, what made you want to write this?
I think this is a little bit of a different book in that it's not a homeschool how-to book. So a mom who's been homeschooling for 20 years could hopefully pick up this book and really glean some truth from it, as well as the mom who's just starting out, because it really speaks to the pain points that we have and the fear that we have. It's a book of encouragement that really sets your gaze back on your very source of bravery, and that's God. And so the reason I wrote this book is because there are lots of homeschooling how-to books out there to sort of give you marching orders, and your 12-step programs and your checklists, and those are very helpful. But at the end of the day, you can't tack a pretty system onto soul work. Yeah. And so I hope that my book really helps a mom sort of quiet the voices of not good enough.
Yes. Yes. Let's take a really quick break to hear from one of our sponsors, and then we'll be back in a few minutes, and I want to talk about a few more things with you.
Absolutely.
Okay. Take a quick drink. It's so funny that he just walked in with this book. He never walks in while I'm recording. I'm like, why is he opening the door? He hands me the book. And I was like, oh, yay. Good timing.
I was hoping it would come today.
Yeah, that is awesome. And I love the cover. It's so much fun. Did you design this?
The way it worked is they gave me a list, like a checklist of things that I was hoping to see on the cover, and some visions that I had. I sent them about 20 different samples of covers I liked and why I liked them and things I didn't like about them. And I gave them a couple specific things that I wanted, and they came up with a few samples, and we from there kind of they knocked it out of the park. I just love it.
I love it. They did a great job with it. I absolutely love it. So, okay. All right. Let's jump back in. We are back with Jamie talking about her new book, Homeschool Bravely. What a great book this is. We were just talking about the cover of it and how much fun the cover is. It's colorful and it's engaging and it's bright, and I love things like that. Talk about, in the book, I know one of the things that you mentioned is about how 1/3 of all new homeschool moms quit after the first year.
Mhm.
Why do you think this is?
That's a staggering number, isn't
It
it?
is.
That's 33%
Yeah,
of
that's
mothers who
huge.
start end up quitting.
Mm-hmm.
You know? I think there's a couple of different reasons. I don't think you can peg it on any one thing, but I think some of the biggest contributing factors are one, homeschooling can be a very lonely road
Mm-hmm.
and very isolating if you do not surround yourself with a community of other moms sort of circling the wagons
Mm-hmm.
and showing you the way. But I realize that there are a lot of moms who are in very isolating communities. And
Right.
what do you do with that? You
Yeah.
can't just go dig up friends that aren't
Right.
there. Um, so I think isolation is one of the factors.
So
I
really quickly on that point, do you talk about in the solutions part how to go about finding community?
Absolutely. There's a whole
Okay.
chapter about it.
Okay.
And also how to sort of speak to the naysayers,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that's another reason that a lot of homeschool moms, maybe not the reason they give up, but definitely something that adds to
Mm-hmm.
their fears and leads them to giving up is the naysayers. We talk about how to answer the naysayers because if you anytime you choose a different path, homeschooling or otherwise,
Yeah.
there are always going to be people, other folks shouting
Mm-hmm.
from the curb telling you you're doing it wrong while you're
Sure.
actually down in the trenches doing the work.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to have some real practical, tangible things. Hold them in your hand to know when those
Yeah.
naysayers come. How am I going to respond? And actually, as a Christian, what is the biblical response?
Yeah.
And people question your decision to homeschool. So I think those are a couple of the reasons. I also think that um, the fear, the fear of the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
You don't always see the immediate fruit.
Right.
This is a life work, just like motherhood is, and
Yeah.
you're not going to see the fruit of it tomorrow. In fact, sorry to say, you might not see the fruit of it for years and years and years
Mm-hmm.
to come. And we're such a quick fix society that if we don't see the fruit tomorrow or
Mm-hmm.
by the end of that first school year, we want to give up because we think we failed. We think we did something wrong. Our life doesn't look like the curriculum catalog cover,
Yeah.
with the smiling children and the mom who doesn't have any gray hairs. So I think we sit in the weight of this
Mm-hmm.
failure centric thought or mentality. And if there's nobody to come alongside us and to cheer us on and to help us carry that banner, then it's easy to give up.
Yeah. It is. I can say that there have been many times, not where I've wanted to give up on homeschooling, but where that fear sets in. And like you said, because oftentimes we can't see the results right in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
And so, my oldest is in 7th grade this year. And I'm like, oh, and she's getting ready to go into high school. And I hope we're doing okay. I hope we're filling in all the blanks. Um, and it is a little bit terrifying. We were in Nashville recently at the Teach Them Diligently convention, and I was talking to Ray Perry. She is a former homeschool mom. She's a grandma now, but she has a home business company, and she's fantastic. And she just sat down with me and she said, "How's homeschooling going?" And I didn't break down, but I just was like, "Oh, Ray, I don't even know how to answer that." I said, I just feel like we're not always doing what we're supposed to be doing. Now, I understand we've been recording or filming for this movie for 2.5 years, and I have had multiple moms sit in front of me and say, just take it easy, take a breath, let God have control of this, allow him to fill in all of the gaps, and your kids are going to be fine. You do what God's called you to do, and your kids are going to turn out fine. And I still have that anxiety of like, oh, I hope I'm not messing it up. I hope I'm doing all right. And she just sat me down and she said, "You're doing a great job." She said, "God has you guys exactly where he wants you to be. He is going to fill in all the gaps. It's going to be great. Your kids are going to be so much better off for having been homeschooled." And it was just great. I needed an older mom to come alongside of me and just remind me once again, because I feel like I need to be reminded of that over and over and over and over again.
Well, and I think that's the enemy's biggest trick when it comes
Yeah.
to moms is to, one, make us think that we even can do it in and of our own
Right.
strength. Like God will only give us what we can handle. But that's just not true. Of course, he's going to give us some things that we can't handle.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if we could handle it, what would be the need of
Right.
us,
That's right.
So he wants us to first think we can, get it all done. If we just pull up our big girl pants, we can do it.
Yeah.
And then when we don't,
Mm-hmm.
at the first little tripping or stumbling, we feel like a failure. We're face down in the muck,
Mm-hmm.
and we want to throw in the towel.
Yep. That's
all
right.
part of his scheme.
It really is. It really is. So, and going back to community, that's so much part of why we need community, because we need other moms to come alongside of us, and we need to encourage one another, because there might be a day where I'm feeling really low and discouraged and frustrated, and I have a friend who's like, nope, you've got this. And then another day she may be feeling that way, and I can come alongside of her and say, nope, you've got this. Let's keep doing this. Let's link arms and let's do this together.
Yeah.
So community is so important. We have a few more minutes left, so I want to talk about a few more things. Let's talk about the feeling of being overwhelmed. I know I find myself here oftentimes. I'm sure you do. I'm sure pretty much every mom does, where we feel like we're trying to just juggle life, all of these things, being a wife, being a mom, being a teacher, being, a taxi driver, being whatever it is that we're doing with our families. Maybe oftentimes we're involved with ministry, or we're helping to lead a co-op, or there's just so many things. How do you encourage that mom who is just dealing with feeling overwhelmed?
Well, I guess I would say that, remember, anything worth doing is going to be hard. Think about marriage, parenting, any of the eternal things that have eternal value. They're going to be difficult, and it's going to require, digging in and doing the hard work. Don't be afraid by that.
Yeah.
And don't be surprised by that. I think it's very easy for a homeschool mom to be overwhelmed. And I also think that no one else around you but other homeschool moms are going to truly understand right where you're sitting, and will truly understand the overwhelm. It's easy to look at a homeschool mom who's at home all day and just think, well, she must sit around in her jammies eating bonbons.
Yeah.
And if I need a babysitter, I'll call that homeschool mom, because what else is she doing all day? They just don't understand. So I think it's really important, like you said, with the community, to have other women who recognize and see you and see your struggles. And then I think too, I find it very helpful, and this is a boots on the ground practical tip that seems to work, at least for me. I find it very helpful to really I don't want you to think of homeschooling as a job, but in some ways you kind of have to. You have to be able to say, this fits in this time frame of my day, and I'm not going to let it, commandeer and strong arm the whole day.
Right.
So we start homeschool around 9:30 in theory on good days. And then at 3 o'clock, I'm teaching 5. So they're not always doing school from 9:30 to 3, but I am, because I'm one person and there's 5 of them.
Right.
But at 3 o'clock, I have a hard and fast rule that I'm done. Because then I need to go on and do other things. I work from home, so I've got to juggle that. Like you said, there's ministry things that need to be done. And plus, I'm also a wife.
Right.
And I want to love my husband well, and I want to love my children as a mother. So I think sometimes you just have to give homeschooling the right weight and importance in the day. And I think too often, especially at first, homeschool moms, because of just the weight of a child's education, we give homeschooling way more control of our lives, and make it harder than it's supposed to be, and make it bigger than it's supposed to be. Yes, academics, education, absolutely important, but your life is worth more than a textbook or the next test or that next worksheet. So I think it's really important to have put homeschooling in the proper perspective.
Yeah. Yes. I love that. Unfortunately, we are out of time for the podcast, but I would love to stay on with you and continue talking, because I want to talk about a few more things. I want to talk about moms who don't feel called to homeschool, because some feel like they need to homeschool because maybe their child's being bullied, or maybe they, don't feel comfortable with the public school, but they can't afford the private school, and they just feel like it's their only option. But they don't necessarily feel like God is prompting them to homeschool. So I want to talk to those moms I want to talk about community. We touched on this a little bit earlier, but I want to give some practical advice that you give in your book. But I want to, for those who have ordered the book and maybe it hasn't they haven't received it yet, talk about how they can go about finding community. Because for those introverts, it might not be as easy. And then I want to talk about the naysayers. We talked about that as well a little bit, but I want to give some practical advice on how people can respond to those naysayers in their lives. So we are going to close out the podcast right now, but for the Backstage Pass members, we're going to stay on and they can listen to the rest of our conversation. For those of you who are not yet familiar with the Backstage Pass membership, Schoolhouse Rocked is a film that we are in production on right now, looking to release in summer of 2020. But we have a Backstage Pass membership site, and with the membership site, we have a ton of resources on there, mostly videos. So a lot of them are the full-length videos, video interviews of people that we've had in the movie, like Heidi St. John. Oh my goodness, there's so many. I should have the list in front of me right now. Israel Wayne, Sam Sorbo. There's a bunch of people that we've got. So we'll have their full interviews on there. Many of them are already on there. And then for our podcast, oftentimes like this, I just have more that I want to talk about. So we will continue the discussion and people can view that discussion on video on the Backstage Pass membership site. So, if you're not familiar, go to schoolhouserocked.com, click on Backstage Pass, and you can find out more about that. And it's a great way to support what we're doing with the podcast and with the film and all that we have going on with Schoolhouse Rocked. So we would love it if you would check that out. Jamie, tell us where people can find you.
Well, you can find me at the unlikelyhomeschool.com and Facebook and Instagram, and then over at momtomompodcast.com.
Okay, great. We will link those in the show notes. And then again, the name of your book is Homeschool Bravely, How to Squash Doubt, Trust God, and Teach Your Child with Confidence. And that is already out on Amazon, probably through your website, right? You can pretty much find it anywhere.
Yep, Barnes & Noble, christianbook.com, all of the places. And actually, if you want to know more about the book, you can go to homeschoolbravely.com.
Great. Thank you so much, Jamie, for joining me today. We will continue this discussion for Backstage Pass members. And for those listening, thank you for listening today. It is such a joy to be with you, and go love your babies and enjoy your day. We'll talk to you guys later. Okay, 1 second. Okay. Another drink of my smoothie. Give me just 1 second. Let me look at my notes really quickly because I want to make sure we got all those. I think I said 4 things I wanted to talk about, and for some reason I just lost one of them. So hello to those watching on Backstage Pass. But I've got 3 of them for sure that I know I wanted to talk about. Let's discuss homeschooling with little kids, because we get asked this question a lot. It's probably the number one question whenever we reach out to our listeners and we've said, what do you want to hear about on the podcast? They, hands down, the number one thing has been, how do you homeschool with multiple ages? So you've got 5 kids. They're a fairly wide range, right? How old is your youngest and oldest?
My oldest is 15 and she's in 10th grade. And my youngest is 6. He'll be 7 on Saturday. So
okay.
We're going to say he's 7.
Okay. Well, by the time this podcast airs, he will be 7.
He will be 7.
So you do have a pretty good range. And so you've been through that season of homeschooling with newborn babies, nursing babies, toddlers under feet. Yep. Talk to the mom who is trying to figure out how to juggle it all.
Okay. Well, first I'd say juggling it all it's good in theory, but it never works out. And so you can't even assume that you're going to be able to juggle it all. It's really not about trying to juggle it all. It's really about trying to live in the tension between playing mom and playing teacher. And sometimes, if you think about the word homeschool, sometimes your day will be home school and sometimes it will be home school. And it's going to vary from day to day. And you just have to assess, just like any job. And I hate even equating homeschooling to a job, because it definitely is more in line with like a ministry and pouring out yourself for the needs of your family. But if you think of any job, almost all vocations, you kind of have to fight the biggest fire in front of you. And so that's kind of how it has to be when you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to play mom and teacher. I think also, if you remember that academics are important,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. I'm not dismissing them or belittling them. But there is a reason that God gave your home at this time a baby or a toddler.
Yeah.
And sometimes that baby or toddler is the biggest lesson for those
Mm.
kids to learn. Sometimes it's them seeing you handle the tantrum with grace and love.
Yeah.
It's them seeing you clean up another mess with a smile on your face and
Mm-hmm.
forgiveness in your heart. And if they can learn that lesson, I would say at the end of this, these 12 years, when all is said and done and it's all played out and we do the autopsy on the whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
that's going to be the lesson that lasts.
Yeah. Because
And
they're learning life lessons.
yeah,
It's not, like you said, it's not just the academics. Those are important, but they're learning so much more. They're learning character development and how to care for their families and how to care for their siblings and how to
and
build relationships.
yeah. In my book, I have pages and pages of ideas for teaching and all the while playing mom with toddler, how to, I don't
Mm,
want to say occupy your toddlers because we want to do more than that. We don't want
yeah.
to just survive toddlerhood. We actually want to thrive in it and help them to thrive in it too. So I do have lots of great ideas for some things that you can do with them and that you can partner with your older kids to help you do with them, and kind of how to set up the day on a schedule that works when you have babies and toddlers. But
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, you have to acknowledge that toddlers have like a 3-minute shelf life.
Right.
You can pull out all the rabbits from every hat and have all the jazz hands, and it's only going to last for so long. But the great thing is they might have short attention spans, but they're always learning, they're always growing. So by the end of the school year, you're not going to have the same child on your hands as you did at the beginning of the school year. And that should really, hopefully, encourage a mom to know, they're only little for so long,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Yes. I know oftentimes it's hard for those who have multiple kids because with their first one, they're able to spend so much time with them and
Mhm.
they're always with them. Even, I mean, I have two, but I remember with my first, it was just her and I, like we did everything together and she had all of my attention. Um, and then my second one came along and I'm like, oh gosh, now I have to actually split my attention. And my oldest one, her love language is quality time. So she wants to be with me all the time still, which I love. But then, I had to learn to kind of figure out, okay, well now we've got your baby sister. But like you said, I was able to include her in a lot of what we did, obviously. And that was fun because then it makes them feel like they're needed and wanted. And,
Mhm.
they are a welcome member of the family and their skills are important.
And I think that speaks to something else we always need to keep in the back of our heads. It's really easy for a mom to feel guilty with that second or third or fourth child
Mm-hmm.
to think, I'm not providing the same thing for them as I did for that number one or that
Mm-hmm.
first or even the second.
Yeah.
Your homeschool, just like your home, is always going to have to ebb and flow, and it
Mm-hmm.
will change. And the dynamics will change. But it is not by accident that God put that child as the third born or the
Mm-hmm.
fourth born, because there's something in that sort of pecking order or chain of command or birth order, whatever you want to call it. There's something in that God wants for that child.
Yeah.
And so, yes, my fifth born had a completely different preschool experience than my first, but it wasn't bad. It was just
Right. Just
different.
different.
He had the love and connection of four other older
Mm.
siblings that first one didn't have. And
Right.
no, he didn't have all the lap books and the
Yeah.
fun manipulatives all the time and the finger plays, but he got a lot of things that she didn't get because of
Mm-hmm.
four other siblings. So don't carry 1 ounce of guilt over the fact that you think you're sad or sorry that it's different for your littles than it was for your first, because
Yeah.
different isn't bad, it's just different.
Oh, that is great advice. And I love that you said in the book you actually give practical wisdom on how to deal with that. So that's great. We talked before. I did remember my other question. I was like, what was it? I have a few others I want to talk about, but we talked about being called to homeschool. So oftentimes moms will say, God called me to homeschool. We feel that way. We felt like the Lord was calling us to homeschool. And I know that sometimes people hear that and it's just, kind of our Christianese lingo. But, we felt like the Lord had put it on our hearts to homeschool our first daughter. But not everybody feels that way. Some do it out of desperation. Some do it because they really have no other choice. Talk to the mom who may not feel called to homeschool. And then do you talk about that in your book as well?
Yeah, that's the actual whole second chapter is calling or coincidence.
Okay.
Yeah, I've talked to moms from all over the world who are homeschooling for the gamut of reasons. I have a bunch of late sleepers, and it would feel like Armageddon trying to grab, pull them out to be at the bus at 6:30. Or I have a husband who has a really odd work schedule, and I want him to be able to be with our kids. I have a child who was bullied. I have a child who has learning struggles. There's all different reasons that we can pinpoint is the starting point for a family. But I think it's really necessary for a mom to recognize that it's in those practical, everyday circumstances that God hands us that we'll find his calling. We might not look at it and see it as a calling. It might look just like, a scheduling glitch or whatever.
Yeah.
But I often look at it as it's just like the two men who were walking on the road to Emmaus. They didn't recognize that man as Jesus. But it was him just the same. And he's there in the everyday practical circumstances that he's given to you and your family. So you can grab a hold of that and be assured that's your calling. In fact, you have to, because you cannot spend one day of homeschooling without firmly grabbing a hold of that. Or like the man who built his house on the sand, at the first sign of storm, your homeschool is going to crumble.
Yeah. Yep. I agree completely. I did a episode several months ago with Abby Ranella, and we talked about the why of homeschooling. And then I actually did a video roundtable with Abby and Karen DeBuse, and we talked about the why of homeschooling. And if moms don't know their why, if they don't understand why they're doing this in the first place, it's so easy to give up. It's so easy when it gets hard, because it's going to get hard. And there's so much blessing in it, but it's hard. You said earlier in the show, anything worth doing is going to be hard. Marriage is hard. Parenting is hard. Homeschooling is hard. All of those things, they're worth it, but they're hard sometimes. And so if we don't understand our why and we're not convicted of doing this for the right reasons, it's so easy to give up.
I think it's really important for a mom not just to know that why, but also to seek God and ask him for a scripture to claim to that would be the why, the answer to that why, because the shaky days will come. Absolutely 100%. So on those shaky days, on those hard days, you need something to go back to, something that is firm and solid. Otherwise, you are going to crumble. So always go back to your why, but most importantly, go back to the scripture that God gives you to point you to the good work that you're supposed to do.
Yeah, I love that idea. Your family scripture. I love that. Do you have one by chance for your family?
Every single summer before, it's not necessarily a family one. I call it a homeschool scripture. Every summer I pray and I ask God, I know the shaky days will come, because they always do. And you promise that they will. In the world we will have struggle. I'm not going to be surprised or so God, I know those days are going to come. In your kindness to me, will you please give me just, I call it a rhema word, and I talk about that in my book. That's the word from Matthew. It's a Greek word that means the very breath-filled word of God. God, give me a rhema word that on those shaky days I can constantly go back to. And so it's a new verse every year. And it's great to have a new one every year, because anything new, a new dress, new shirt, anything new
is exciting.
Breathes life into something old. So every year it's a new verse, and without fail, he gives me a verse. By the time we're starting school, I'll stumble upon it in a sermon I'm listening to, or a passage I'm reading for my devotions, or whatever. He always, because he's a faithful God,
Yeah.
gives me his word.
Oh, that is a great idea. Do you have passages in the book? Maybe some of the ones that you have used for your family?
Yep. In that second chapter, I kind of walk you through from beginning to where I am right now, just some of those verses that God has given to me. Not that they're going to be the silver bullet for anybody else, but
Sure.
for
Yeah.
exactly what I needed. And if you can learn anything from them or
Yeah.
get any encouragement from them, here they are.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that so much. Let's talk about community. So earlier in the podcast, in the first half, we talked about community and the importance of having community around you. But I want to talk to those moms who are introverts. I am not. I am a total extrovert. I can easily go to a new place and find new moms to communicate with and just do life with. Not that it happens overnight, but I know how to get there. And I will say, in saying that, I've never been to a place where there has not been a good homeschool community. The Lord has always placed our family in areas where there have been really strong homeschool communities. So I've had that, which has been a huge blessing. And I know not all moms have that, as you had mentioned. But let's talk to the mom who is she is an introvert, painfully introverted, and she has a really hard time putting herself out there and finding friends and finding connections for her, because it's important not just for her, but also for her kids to do that. How can you encourage that mom?
Okay, I think the answer is twofold. First of all, you have to remember that you get to pick your tribe.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not the mom who wants the big, homeschool mom's night out, if that's not your bag, you don't got to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sort of an ambivert. I kind of land right in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
I love being with people for only so long, and then I
Uh-huh.
need to regroup and recharge. So I have my in-person groups that I actually helped start one, and I talk about it in the book about how that got launched and how even after 13 years it's still going strong, even though I don't
Wow.
need it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But how to have those larger in-person connections. But I also have 2 Voxer groups, and Voxer is just like an audio messaging
Mm-hmm.
app of a couple of moms that we go back and forth, and I'll drop a little voice message to them in the middle of the day when I have a moment, and then they can listen to it when they have a moment and respond to me. I don't have to see anybody face to face. I can be in my pajamas, I can be eating my chocolate or whatever, and I'm still being affirmed. I'm still being in a way seen and known. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing. When we talk about community, it's really God designed us for community.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some innate craving in all of us to be seen,
Mm-hmm.
to be known, to be loved.
Yeah. Sure.
And for the mom who's an introvert, or maybe a mom who's shy, if you can just remember that same heart cry that you have is the same heart cry of the woman next to you.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
if one of you just has the courage or the bravery to reach out and say, this is a need that I have, you're
Mm-hmm.
going to give the other mom the courage to do the same. So I guess my answer is you have to have a little bit of bravery to reach out across the aisle and invite somebody else in your space. And I realize in real life, face to face, that's not always possible for every
Mm-hmm.
mom, because there are some small communities where maybe you are the only homeschooler
Yeah.
in that you know of, or in your church or whatever. I recently just moved to a city 2 hours away. We've been here for 2 months, and I've had to be very intentional
Mm-hmm.
to reach out and find community, not just for me, but for my kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I need them to see me reaching out to other moms. But
Yeah.
sometimes it's a matter of making the first move. I'm the newbie. I don't know
Yeah.
anybody here. So I actually had to reach out and start being the one who introduces myself and starts making connections, because nobody's going to do that for me.
Yeah. How did you do that in your new city? How did you just put yourself out there and find new friends?
A couple of things. Obviously, getting involved in a local church is
Mm-hmm.
priority. But to be honest, I only know of one other homeschooler in our whole church, and it's
Okay.
quite a big church that we've been going to. I did reach out to a mom's Bible study in the area that, because they met during the day and they had a kids component,
Mm-hmm.
I just knew, well, that kids component has to have some homeschoolers in it,
Yeah.
right? Because it's during the day. And sure enough, they did have a thriving homeschool
Mm-hmm.
group. You can get in contact with co-ops in the area. Sometimes that's
Mm-hmm.
a matter of like going on Facebook and
Mm-hmm.
putting in your city and the word homeschool, and you'd be
Yeah.
surprised at how many things crop up.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know I don't, hesitate to say this, because I don't agree with many of the things posted on social media. But you've got Facebook groups, and pretty much any place that we've been, whether we've been visiting or staying long-term or whatever we've been doing there, I've been able to go to at least find on Facebook a local homeschool group. Um,
Or
and
talk to your state. Most states, not all,
yeah,
most states have a state convention or a state
right,
association, homeschooling association. So if you get in contact with them and say, "Listen, I'm in this new town. Do you know of any groups
right.
or a point person, a contact person in that
Yeah.
area? Maybe there isn't a group currently. Maybe God has
Hmm.
brought you to that community because
Yeah.
you'll be the answer to somebody else's prayers,
Yes.
and they've been wanting a thriving homeschooling community."
Yes. Yes. Totally. And it's a great way to connect with people. I mean, I hate and love social media all at the same
Yeah.
time. But it's been a great way to connect with people and to meet people. And, you just say, hey, I'm new to the area.
Mhm.
Does anybody live in Greenville, South Carolina? I'm moving there and we need some friends. And
And that's exactly what I did. I
always,
just went
yeah,
on Facebook and said, "I'm coming to the area in 2 weeks.
yeah,
What do you have available? Who's out
yes,
there that needs a homeschool friend?" And it takes some courage to put yourself out there,
sure.
but everybody
Hmm.
everybody wants to be seen and known. So if
Yeah.
you do, they do.
Yes, yes, I love it. So, okay, great. And then we have a few more minutes. I want to talk about the last thing. Let's talk about naysayers.
Mm.
You had mentioned that again earlier, and I know in your book you talk about how to respond to the naysayers. Can you give some practical advice? Because we're in a time of the year right now where there are a whole lot of parents who are saying, okay, you know what, this school gig just isn't working out for us. We're going to homeschool next year. And they're going to maybe grandma and grandpa or their neighbor or their friend and saying, we're going to homeschool next year. And those people are looking at them like they've got three eyes and saying, you're going to do what? Um, how can they practically respond to these people?
You will always have naysayers,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you choose a different path. And sadly, sometimes the naysayers are the people in your closest circle.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very painful,
Yeah.
and hard. I think the gut instinct for most of us, at least it is for me, is to match snark for snark. Say something nasty about my decision. Well, I've got 5 things nasty to say about your decision. That's just
Yeah.
my human nature. But what is the Christ honoring response in that? Am I trying to prove points or build a relationship is really what I try to
Mm.
ask myself anytime I receive some criticism. And believe me, as a former school teacher, I've received more than my share of criticisms for crossing the party line.
Yeah.
And at first I know I didn't handle it very well. But what I've learned over the years is that, first of all, a lot of that criticism comes because the other person is fearful.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Sure.
we often put on fighting gloves when we feel like we're on the defensive.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes, especially when I chose to homeschool after teaching for so many years, I received a lot of criticism from coworkers, and really what it boiled down to was, here was a woman who had been maybe teaching for 30 plus years and has given her life to the education of kids, and she was offended that
Yeah.
I would choose a different way. And to her, in her mind, she thought,
Mm-hmm.
in choosing a different way, I or in wanting to do something different,
Mm-hmm.
it's like I was turning my back on her.
Right.
She couldn't remove herself from the decision.
Right. You're discrediting the
Very,
choice that she's
yeah.
made. Right.
And even just knowing that,
Mm-hmm.
recognizing that, taking the time to sit and maybe wear her shoes for a few steps, I
Mm-hmm.
could then answer her with much more grace.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is, let your kids be the proof.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You don't always have to carry the picket signs and be the blowhorn for homeschooling. You just stick your head down, do the work, and then let God handle your reputation.
Yeah.
Your kids will be all the proof that you need when they are kind, when they are serving God, when they are loving Him, when they are when they're talking to that maybe aunt at the Thanksgiving dinner table who is, questioning your ability or their academics, when they're responding with love and they're articulate, that is proof enough.
Mm-hmm.
You don't always have to take up the banner.
Right. Yeah. Yep. And that goes back to the calling thing that we were talking about. Sometimes the answer can be as simple as just saying, this is what God's called us to do.
Yep.
Absolutely. And especially if you have family members or the naysayers in your life are believers, it's pretty hard to argue against that. It's like people going out on the mission field. Oftentimes people, kids will come to their parents and say, I feel like God's calling me to go on the mission field. And out of fear, their parents will often say, I don't think that's a good idea. I don't want my kid to go out on the mission field. I don't want them to go to China. I don't want them to go to Africa. I don't want them to go somewhere where they could get hurt. And it's because they're fearful and they just don't know. And the best answer you can give is, this is what God's called me to do. I would be disobeying if I didn't do it.
And an unsaved relative or friend isn't going to understand that answer.
Right.
But they're not going to understand a million different things that you choose to do.
Yeah, right.
And that's okay.
Right. Yes. And sometimes you just have to say, you might not understand it or agree with it, but please just back me up on it because you care about me and you trust me to make the decision that's best for our family. Because sometimes I think we feel like we need to go into this big, long explanation and give this dissertation on, or all these points of why we're homeschooling. That's not necessary. Now, maybe some feel like they need to do that, and that's fine. But you don't need to have a whole, book report on why you're homeschooling your kids. It's what you and your husband feel is best for your family. And hopefully they will just accept that. And I think usually they come around. Almost every time they come around.
And homeschooling is now in second generation status. And granted, we don't have millions of children, as proof to back up
yet
or what the path we've chosen. But there's lots of proof out there. My husband is one of them. And so we have in our own family circles some unsaved relatives who, we get the raised eyebrows and the questions, but I just point to him. He certainly turned out fine, and so there are some great proofs out there that this thing works.
Yes. Yep. It absolutely does. So we are out of time. Thank you so much, Jamie, for your time today. Tell our listeners one more time, for those who might have missed it in the first part of the show, where they can find you.
You can find me at theunlikelyhomeschool.com. You can grab my book at homeschoolbravely.com, or if you want to give a listen to our podcast, which is specifically just for mothers, at momtomompodcast.com.
Okay. And your podcast airs every other Tuesday, correct?
Every other Tuesday, yep.
Okay. And how long is it about?
We try to keep it short, 30 minutes or less, because moms are busy.
Yes, they are. That's what we try to do with the podcast as well. Keep it around 30 minutes. So that's fantastic. Well, thank you again. You are such a joy and a delight, and I am so grateful for your time today. Thank you for encouraging our listeners.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And for those watching on Backstage Pass, thank you guys for watching today. I hope you have a blessed day. And if there are other guests that you'd like to see on the show or topics you would like us to talk about, let us know. Send us an email. You can send it to me, Yvette at schoolhouserocked.com, or you can send it to podcast@schoolhouserocked.com, and we will do our best to accommodate you. Have a great day. Thanks, Jamie.
Thank you.